Coming up, the Sixers win Ben Simmons' return to Philadelphia. This is Locked On Game to Game NBA.
Every game, every team, every angle. Locked On Game to Game, your team every day.
Welcome in. You are listening to Locked On Game to Game NBA. I'm your host, Kainani Stevens. Thank you for making Locked On your first listen every single weekday. We have all of the action for you from yesterday in the NBA, and we're ready to recap that for you. The Sixers got revenge in Ben Simmons' first game back to Philadelphia, picking up a 9-point win over the Brooklyn Nets. Simmons scored 11 points and added 11 assists in the loss, and Locked On Nets and Sixers go over the Philadelphia win.
Ben Simmons was ready to take on his former team as the Brooklyn Nets battled the Philadelphia 76ers B squad. The only problem? The entire team was not quite on the same page. Adam Armick with the Locked On Nets podcast. It was a successful return for Ben Simmons to his former team. Amongst the boos raining down from the crowd, he put together a nice and consistent performance. His third straight quality game for the Brooklyn Nets, but it just doesn't matter. Again, taking on a team in the 76ers that were missing everybody and still managing to get outworked, out-hustled, out-rebounded, and in many ways outshot throughout this game. They come up on the short end of the stick, and it's a little bit deflating. Consistent for this team that seems to be on a pendulum swing, up and down, game-to-game kind of rotation. And while it isn't cause for overreaction, it's just another reminder that there's already been so much that has gone on early in this season and plenty that the Brooklyn Nets will need to figure out in the coming weeks, including how do you find a starting rotation that utilizes your best players when some of them, like Ben Simmons and Nicholas Claxton, are simply going to have a hard time functioning together on the court. You can hear us break all of this down in the Locked On Nets podcast right here on the Locked On Podcast Network.
De'Aaron Fox led the Sacramento Kings in Memphis after a furious comeback try from Ja Morant and the Grizzlies. Locked On Grizzlies go over the final from Tennessee.
Surprised that the Sacramento Kings knocked off the Memphis Grizzlies on a Tuesday night in FedEx Forum? You shouldn't be. The Sacramento Kings are currently the deeper team with the better offense, at least in this one. Sacramento looks the part of being the deserving victor. I am Joe Mullinax of Locked On Grizzlies, and don't get it twisted. The Kings tried to find ways to get Memphis back in this game. It was not as close throughout the contest, especially in the third quarter, as the final score suggests. But no Zaire Williams still, no Desmond Bane still. While a returning Ja Morant made his presence known, especially late in the contest, while Jaren Jackson Jr. was dominant throughout the game, and while Dillon Brooks did show that defensive acumen of his time and time again to help the Grizzlies get back in it, the fact remains the Grizzlies do not have the same level of depth that the Kings do at the moment. Sacramento's offense thrives because of it, and Memphis, relying on rookies and guys that are out of rotational spots, weren't able to answer the call.
Coming up, the Pistons get a big road win in Denver. This is Locked On Game to Game NBA. Today's edition of Locked On Game to Game is brought to you by BetOnline, the #1 spot for all of your online sports betting needs. No matter what sport you want to bet on, you can do that there. The World Cup is underway. And of course, we have those Thanksgiving football games right around the corner. So just head over to betonline.net. It's where the game starts. Welcome back to Locked On Game to Game NBA. I'm your host, Kainani Stevens. Thank you for making Locked On your first listen every weekday. Pistons won their first game on the road all season last night by knocking off the Nuggets in Denver, and Locked On Pistons tell you how Detroit got it done.
This one was definitely unexpected. Host of Locked On Pistons podcast, Kukil here. The Pistons somehow defeat the Denver Nuggets in the return of their megastar in Nikola Jokic along with Jamal Murray, Aaron Gordon in the lineup, Michael Porter Jr. in the lineup, KCP in the lineup. And the Pistons are without Cade Cunningham, they're without Sadiq Bey, Isaiah Stewart, and they still win this game. Hold to the Denver Nuggets to 108 points, and Dwayne Casey decided to close this game with some unusual faces. He closed the game with Jalen Duren, Kevin Knox, Corey Joseph, Alec Burks, and the one familiar face in Bojan Bogdanovic. They ended up pulling this one out by 2 points. I don't know how they did it. Absolutely shocked the hell out of me. Major props to Kevin Knox, who had his best game of the season. Has played really well the last 2 games. He had 17 points and 8 rebounds. I said in the last podcast, if Kevin Knox is going to be as active as he is the last few games on the boards, he needs to continue to get minutes because he's one of the only ones who are willing to get dirty on the boards. And he was second on the team in rebounds in this game, and that really helped the team. So Shocking win for the Pistons, their first road win of the season, and I guess the locker room really needed this one.
Two of the last three Western Conference champs faced off in very different positions last night. The Lakers still need to figure out the season, but they seem to be getting better, while the Suns are off to a hot start at home. Our Locked On Lakers host looks at the final from the desert.
The Zane Kamenetsky, co-host of Locked On Lakers podcast, and Lakers lose 115-105 to the Suns in Phoenix. No LeBron for the fifth straight game with that strained groin, although Chris Haynes did say during the broadcast on TNT that sources told him LeBron should be returning Friday against San Antonio, and the Lakers really do need him back, although Anthony Davis has been an absolute monster during this period. Tonight was no exception. 37 points on 11 of 17 shooting, 15 of 16 at the line, 21 rebounds, 5 blocks, 5 assists, and unfortunately, very little help beyond 24 points from Lonnie Walker and 21 fairly inefficient points from Russell Westbrook. It was a game where the Lakers shot 18% from three and also turned the ball over 17 times, giving up 16 points in the process. You can maybe get away with one of those as the lesser team on the road. You definitely can't get away with both. A spirited battle by the Lakers, and they definitely, right down to Patrick Beverley getting ejected for shoving DeAndre Ayton after he had been taunting Austin Reeves. The Lakers had some fight, but not quite enough skill to go along with it. A lot more to get into, so make sure you are subscribing to the Locked On Lakers YouTube channel and that you make Locked On Lakers your first listen wherever you get your podcasts.
That's all for today on Locked On Game to Game NBA. Thank you so much for making Locked On your first listen every single weekday. Make sure that you go and subscribe to Locked On NBA and your team's Locked On podcast on YouTube and wherever else you get your podcasts from. I'm Kainani Stevens. This has been Locked On Game to Game.